Welcome to the show. It's this week's shortlist with myself, your host, Johnny Campbell, CEO and co-founder of Social Talent. And today, as we're recording this show, is the 20th of January, 2021. It is Inauguration Day in the US, the day that the US welcomes in a new president. This kicks off as we're recording in about 30 minutes. So midway through our show, the initial speeches. And if you're watching live, don't worry, we'll be all done before the actual inauguration happens. You can go watch it. If you're listening to the podcast, it all happened. The big news happened, whatever the big news is. And for those of you in the talent world, you'll be glad to see in the last couple of hours that it's come out that one of the first things the President-elect Biden is planning to do is to revoke one of the executive orders related to our industry that Trump instituted back in October related to diversity and inclusion training, which spooked many of you in the US who are federal contractors and made you question whether you could roll out certain diversity and inclusion training initiatives. Well, the Biden administration has promised to revoke that today. So that's good news for all of us in the talent industry. Better news for you, though, those of you listening live and listening to the podcast, is who we have as our guest today. Before I introduce our guest and talk about today's topic, I want to quickly remind you that you can find a kind of track list of all of our previous shows, and you can preview our upcoming shows on the Social Talent website at socialtalent.com/the shortlist. If you're listening to us live, we'd love to have your questions and comments. You can join us on the chat in YouTube or LinkedIn. If you're not listening to us live, any links we share here today will be in the show notes of the podcast. We'd love you to listen to the podcast if you don't already. For those of you on the podcast, welcome back. Don't forget to subscribe. We're available on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you find your podcasts. So let's get stuck into today's show. 5 biggest lessons I learned from my smartest hiring managers. So anyone working in talent or talent acquisition understands the often frustrating relationship between the recruiters, the talent acquisition professionals, and the hiring managers. Whether you're a hiring manager, you've been hiring for a role and you have to work with recruiting, or you're a recruiter having to work with your client/hiring manager, I've no doubt you have had frustration and there's been a disconnect over the years, or maybe it's all the time. On today's special edition of the shortlist, we're going to get stuck into it. We're going to skip the news. There's loads of news going on. You don't need me to remind you of it this week. Joining us today, we have the fantastic John Vlastelica. And John Vlastelica is going to be sharing with us his 5 biggest lessons from the smartest hiring managers he's come across. And John, for those of you who listened to the show before, has been with us before. He's the most popular contributor to the Social Talent platform. Our users and the organizations we work with love his insight. But John, tell our audience, what makes you credible? What gives you the right to tell us about hiring managers and recruiters and the disconnects?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Johnny. It's interesting. I want to actually spend time today talking more around, positive aspects of great hiring managers. I think I get a bad rap sometimes because I talk negatively about the, recruiter hiring manager relationship. And I often talk about how we can make it better, but it can feel like this for a lot of folks. I'm a former head of talent acquisition. I headed up TA at Expedia and was the head of tech recruiting at Amazon years ago. But for 15 years now, I've been leading Recruiting Toolbox, and we do all kinds of consulting and training projects with companies, but half our business or more is focused on work that, touches the kind of recruiter hiring manager relationship, or specifically is around hiring manager capability building. So in addition to working as a practitioner with hundreds and hundreds of hiring managers in my career, we've also trained thousands and thousands of hiring managers, led focus groups with hiring managers from about 30 countries. So we've had the opportunity to work with world-class organizations. They're really kind of give us insights into some common denominator characteristics of the very best hiring managers. And that's what I want to focus on today is really what some of the best hiring managers do differently, and what I've learned as a TA practitioner from many of these great hiring managers.
So I'm glad we're going to focus on the positive. I'm sure you're familiar with a meme that's gone around over the years, John, and there's loads of screenshots, and maybe many of our audience have tried it, where you type into Google, recruiters are, and it brings up a load of stuff. Well, yes, they just for shits and giggles, I typed in hiring managers are. What are the first 2 things that came up, do you think, John? If you've ever tried this, you probably know. What are the things that came up?
I imagine it was something negative, not positive. So tell me, what'd you get?
You are right. The number 1 was hiring managers are stupid. Oh. Number 2, hiring managers are too picky, right?
Yeah.
And it goes on, right? It's actually not that bad, but they're the first 2, and it's disappointing. So, John, absolutely, I think your background, having been a practitioner is brilliant. You've lived and breathed this, running a recruiting team, and working with the breadth of companies you've had the experience with is fantastic, getting really in depth on solving this problem. I think there's no one else in the world who's going to understand this more than you, probably going to have more of those insights. So dying to hear your 5 insights. I'm sure our audience are. We've got a bunch of people joining us live. Quick shout out to Marion, James, Katan, Srinsa, Donal, Ina, and tons more who are listening live. Great to have you folks. Dying to hear your questions as well. But I really want to hear, first of all, from John. John, you've 5. Tell me number 1. Let's get stuck into it. What's the first kind of big lesson you've learned over the years?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd like to say that this is something that I figured out on my own, but I really realized kind of the hard way that real strategy and talent acquisition starts before that kickoff meeting, before that the rec is opened. One of the things that I think I tried to do, like a lot of corporate recruiters, is I tried to go into some conversations with hiring managers, when they have the urgency to fill a rec, and I want to start talking to them about strategy, and that could be sourcing strategy, new interviewing strategy, new process, a new diversity focus. I want to try and cram all these things into what can feel like a 30 or 45-minute conversation. And one of the things that I learned from hiring managers, the ones that seem to be getting the best talent, kind of getting their unfair share of top talent, they were really open to engaging with me outside of that conversation. And it became a real signal to me that the best hiring managers, the ones who are getting great talent, are actually thinking about recruiting all the time. And I know we talk about this, always be recruiting, but what I learned as kind of a young Jedi and learning my craft was the hiring managers who were talking about recruiting even when they didn't have a rec open. Even when they didn't have short-term pain and urgency, were the ones that were getting great talent. And from that, I realized I needed to be doing a lot more work outside of that kickoff meeting. Even before I was a recruiting manager and recruiting leader, I was a hands-on recruiter, and I would find myself working with leaders, or leaders even pulling me in, who wanted to talk about how they could go after different kinds of talent, or how they wanted to change their profile, or how we wanted to maybe do something beyond what the compensation team data was saying around compensation and kind of market insights. And so they were kind of pulling me into this conversation. And I want to contrast that with the hiring managers that I would try to engage with as a recruiter in between openings, when they didn't have short-term pain, who would often say, no, I don't want to meet with you. I don't have an opening. Like, why would I spend time with you now? I don't have a need. Like, you're here to fulfill my order. I don't have an order in queue. So why would we talk? And that became a signal to me of one of the big differences between great hiring managers and either average or ineffective hiring managers. Does that make sense, Johnny?
So it does, right? But what do you do if you're a recruiter and you have a whole bunch of hiring managers who are in the latter camp, John, right? They're just not interested in having a conversation. Is there a way, do you recommend any methods that can get them engaged, that can turn them into that preferable hiring manager who does want to have that conversation? How have you seen this work, or does it work?
Yeah, it's interesting. You absolutely can, but I have to be honest, you really have to prove yourself. You have to earn the right to have these strategy conversations outside of rec openings to some degree. So, most hiring managers, most business leaders are quite busy, and the last thing they want is another HR meeting, right? So one of the ways that you make sure that you kind of earn that right to have this meeting outside the kickoff is that you're actually filling roles in partnership with them really effectively. You want to be invited in. And so one of the things that I often say, no pain, no change. If you have a hiring manager who does not feel like they need to change up their strategy, their process, their target candidate profiles, improve diversity, improve their close rate, make a skinnier funnel. If they feel like everything is going really okay and they're not in any pain, I got to be honest, it's going to be really hard for you to insert yourself into an additional, what feels to them like an additional meeting. Like, why would we meet? Why would we spend time? So what I recommend to recruiters who are trying to kind of elevate their role a bit to more of a talent advisor and to kind of earn that opportunity to kind of be more strategic and have meetings outside of the more tactical, we got to get this rec filled role, is you need to be listening for hiring managers that are in pain. Hiring managers that are in pain around diversity, around speed, around quality, something. And that's where you're going to get kind of pulled in a little more. And as you start to work with those hiring managers and kind of insert yourself in and say, hey, hiring manager Johnny, you're in pain around diversity. I'm working with other hiring managers who are doing these kinds of things and are getting these kinds of results. Would you like to meet separately outside of this urgent need and talk about what we can do together to get you this kind of talent? and connecting it back to the kind of social proof influencing technique. Like, I know other hiring managers who are doing this, other hiring managers like you, and they're getting these results and you're getting these results. And if you want to see this kind of talent or you want this kind of speed, there's something different you need to do, and not doing it in a critical, you suck kind of way. You're not criticizing the hiring manager. You're more just saying, if you want this, you can't operate down here, and I can help you do this. I can help you get there. Not just your capabilities, but your process, your strategy, whatever it might be. So that's typically one of the ways to do it, is start with the people in pain. And then once you help those people, you kind of take your lessons learned on a road show and you start to kind of insert yourself in with hiring managers who weren't pulling you in.
I guess analogy that just comes to mind, because it's one I deal with or have dealt with over the years in the investment world, kind of corporate investment world. The majority of deals done are done between parties who've engaged long before the deal process has started.
Right.
You'll find an investor, when the investment process is on, lots of people come into play. And usually the person who ends up doing the deal with the organization, who invests, who does the fundraise or the VC money, they've been talking for years with that organization. They've got to know them. I guess you're kind of saying the same. The really good hiring manager recruiting relationship isn't just happening when the deal is on. You're building that outside the deal, waiting for that to happen, because they're the most successful relationships, not just in recruiting, probably in most transactions like that.
And they're pulling you. Yeah, and they're pulling you. I mean, the smart ones, you don't need to push yourself on them. You don't need to push strategy, push process as much. They're saying, I'm in pain. I want to do something about this. And some of the best hiring managers I've worked with, I got to be honest, it makes me quite nervous, but they've gone off and built their own strategies, right? If we're not stepping up, if the hiring manager's up here, I want to get amazing talent, and we're kind of in this transactional mode, if we're not elevating ourselves, if we're not rising to the occasion, they will go off and build their own. I have so many stories of hiring managers just kind of completely going off the rails and building their own shadow recruiting organizations, starting their own university recruiting programs, creating some crazy process, but it's because they own it. They get the value of it. They value talent so much they're not going to wait for us. So those are the ones you want to kind of grab onto, those really great hiring managers, and help guide them so they don't go totally crazy. Yeah.
I want to move you on to number 2, because I think this is what I so believe in.
Yeah.
Before I do, a quick one, just to remind everyone listening, John's background, while you might hear it American twang, John works with hiring managers and organizations all over the world. And what we're trying to advise you on today here, what John's trying to share is the universal kind of inputs. And we've got people listening today from Kildare, from Geneva, from Mumbai, Bangalore, Vienna, Dublin. So hello, everybody. This is hopefully a very universal thing. Bring me on to number 2, John, your second piece of advice that you've got from hiring managers, or insight you have to share.
Yeah, this is something I hear HR folks talk about and recruiters talk about, but I think it really clicked for me when I heard hiring managers say it, which is it's a quality, not quantity game, that recruiting is about quality. And when I look back and think about those hiring managers that are most effective, the smartest, most effective hiring managers, they didn't just say stuff like this, they lived it. And it showed up in a bunch of different ways. It showed up in I don't actually want to see 30 resumes from you, John. I don't want to actually see everyone that applied from you. And I remember when I was a young recruiter, that was kind of my mode. I didn't have a lot of great recruiter mentors in the beginning. And so I was looking for signals from my hiring managers, who at the time in my early 20s, I treated like my customer, and the customer was always right. So I was just trying to please the hiring manager, right? So the hiring manager wanted to see everyone that applied. Here's everyone that applied. If you want to see all the resume, here's all the, and what I started to realize is, wow, those managers are not getting the same kind of talent as these other managers. What are these other managers doing differently? And they really, truly had a quality over quantity thing. And I even had some of them saying, God, don't send me all 20 applicants or 50, or I don't want to log into the ATS and see everyone. Like, that is the last thing I want to do. I'm looking for you to present 3, 4, 5 qualified, interested, available candidates I can afford. That's what I want to see from you. And it really shaped my thinking. And as I evolved and got more senior, I realized that it went beyond just kind of quantity of resumes, but even quality. Many of the best hiring managers, they don't just say, I want A players and rock stars and high potential, high performers. They define that. They spend time really working with you to define it. And a strong hiring manager, a smart hiring manager, won't let her and her team get away with saying, we just want someone smart who gets things done. They will actually dig in and define something that goes beyond the job description. They will actually define quality in a very specific way and not let coded words that we know now in 2021 are often loaded with bias, like high potential or something might mean you look like me from a diversity standpoint. We're homogenous. You remind me of myself when I was your age, that kind of thing, right? They're defining quality a little differently. I even did a project once. I was at Amazon in the early days, and we used to talk about hiring really smart people. And by the way, I was usually the dumbest person in every room, every meeting I was in, which was a wonderful experience for me. But one of the things that I did is I actually realized we're throwing around this term smart, and we haven't defined smart. And so I worked with some of these really engaged, savvy hiring leaders, these ones that I knew were hiring really amazing talent. You could tell by their contributions, not by their pedigree, but by their contributions, they were amazing talent. And I thought, I wonder how they're thinking about smart. And so we actually unpacked smart. We actually defined smart. And it took months of back and forth to really break it down so that we were really aligned on the signals and the evidence during the interview, things that weren't necessarily on a resume or CV, but things you can learn in an interview. And so the best hiring managers to me have this quality focus, and they're not interested in quantity, but when they do have that quality focus, they actually define it. They're being very specific around what it means.
So it's, easy for us to say, it is quality, not quantity, and therefore they're going to just focus on the best. But for recruiters and talent acquisition folks who've been handing over shortlists time and time again, and there isn't trust, right? They're kind of going, just send them all to me, or they're sending you back after giving you 8, go again. When you hear those kind of stories, they don't trust me, they want all the resumes, or hey, I sent them 8, they said no. When you're trying to diagnose those kind of issues, what do you often see as the problem that's happening? What's blocking us having a relationship where we give quality, they trust, and they act upon it?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I think if it's the first time you're working with a hiring manager, it's kind of hard to kind of come in already credible unless you have a track record with people that hiring manager respects, right? But if it's someone that is kind of pushing back, I still want to see everyone, I would ask you to pause and ask yourself, does this hiring manager really want to spend their time reviewing 20, 50, 75 applicants? And the answer is probably no. But one of the reasons that a lot of hiring managers will request quantity, one is they don't really know what they're looking for, right? So they just want to see stuff. 2 is they're not in pain. So they have this open role and they're just kind of curious, and I'm going to take my time and I just want to see. And 3rd is we enable it. Like, we don't shut that shit down. We just kind of, we just kind of let them ask us and we just give them more. And there needs to be a point where you insert yourself in and you ask, why is this going on? What's the root issue? Is this we didn't define what we're really looking for? Is this more of I haven't done a good job of setting expectations on what's available in the market, and they're trying to learn the market. Like how can I not be an enabler of this, but actually drive them more to this slate of candidates, and you're going to choose from these 3, 4, 5 candidates that we work on. And one of the techniques that a recruiter on my team did, which was fantastic, is she would have calibration resume or profile calibration meetings where she would sit down laptop to laptop. Today we do it over Zoom, and during the kickoff meeting, as a way to kind of accelerate a metric that doesn't exist, but it's a metric I'm kind of pushing, is this metric of time to alignment. How long does it take for you, the recruiter, to get aligned with the hiring manager on what good looks like? And so she would sit laptop to laptop, and they would review candidate profiles on LinkedIn, or if they were tech profiles on some of the tech code sharing sites and other things, and then real resumes that are real, that are people applying, but also maybe resumes that are second place runner-ups from other positions she'd worked on. But there was real-time calibration going on, and that was a really powerful way for her to go from job description language, which can be very broad, or even worse, hiring managers just want to hire someone smart who can hit the ground running, which is like the most bullshit requirement I've ever heard. But I get it. I get what they're trying to get at, but it's not a real requirement, right? So doing that calibration is a really effective way to get people lined up. And that's something that we recommend in our talent advisor training, is to try and insert yourself in that first meeting and get aligned really, really quickly. And that tends to shut down much more of the kind of, let me see more kind of thing.
Good comment here from Srinivasa, who's saying hiring managers will open up more to us when they see results from us, which stand out from the rest of the crowd. We then kind of start getting into those strategy conversations and get them to buy our part of the story. Again, doing your work first to prove it. So you mentioned speed to alignment. Talk to me about speed and maybe point three.
Yeah, so the third thing, I have this funny saying. I think it's funny. Speed is the love language of hiring managers. And I remember when I was young, I had a family member who studied psychology and would talk about this notion of the love language of different people, and it was mostly in the context of, I think, marital counseling work or whatever. Like, what's your love language? And so, as someone that had a Croatian grandmother who liked to cook for me, food was definitely, the love language between us, and that was our bond, and that's how she communicated love, was through her cooking, for example. In a recruiting context, though, I would say, speed is the love language of hiring managers. And one of the things I learned from hiring managers is I would often come in with my traditional HR hat on. I'm John, I'm from the talent team, and I'm here to help you. And almost everything I said next sounded to the hiring manager like I was going to slow them down. I'm going to help you by giving you new interview guides you have to complete. I'm going to help you by teaching you how to do self-service in the ATS and fill out these 82 fields and to open a new rec. I'm going to help you by allowing you to do more of your own sourcing. And most of what is communicated from HR, unfortunately, slows hiring managers down. And so one of the things I quickly realized, if I could pause, this is based on a lot of feedback, lots of people critiquing my work as a recruiter, as a recruiting leader. A lot of people give me feedback like, I need you to help us go faster. Like, I don't want to hear about a time to fill target in recruiting. I don't want to hear what our competitors are doing. I'm telling you, I want you to cut 20 days off time to fill. And I want to hear some ideas for how we do that. And when you get pushed to cut 20 days, not 2 days, but 20 days off a 50-day time to fill or something, that is significant. You really have to think differently. And so what I realized more and more is that the hiring managers that were most savvy, they were not sacrificing quality, but they were inspecting the process. And they're like, why do we interview like this? Why don't we do it in a batch format? Why do we do everything as a one-off? Why don't we make decisions the same day? I would love to say that I came up with a lot of the ideas that I implemented in my career from just kind of navel gazing and looking up to the stars and thinking we should do it differently. But a lot of it was because I was under incredible pressure to deliver faster, to scale. And a lot of the ideas that we came up with, I realized if they were in service to speed, they were in service to the hiring manager. I've never met a hiring manager. Well, that's not true. I rarely meet hiring managers that don't want to go faster, right? I mean, almost everyone wants to go faster. So the more we can kind of help with speed, the more we're winning. The more that we are framing our work around, our metrics or source of hire, for example. Hiring managers don't care about source of hire. If you're delivering speed, quality, and diversity, they don't care. But too much of our communication is around kind of our internal stuff, and we're not connecting the dots. We're not showing like, if you do this, you will go faster. Instead, we're saying this is a new thing you have to do. We're rolling it out globally. We want one consistent process. Consistency and process. That's the language of HR, and it's not the right language for the best hiring managers.
If you were to think of one thing or one part or time in the process, John, that's probably going to unlock the most value in trying to increase speed, where in the process do you think the most value can be unlocked, or what is the thing that you most commonly see that a recruiter or hiring manager can do to try and unlock that speed? Is there a one thing or a top thing?
Yeah, I mean, let me just say first, you should look at time and stage. So if your applicant tracking system or your manual tracking is simply like, what's the date the rec opened, and then when did we kind of get an accepted offer, that's not enough. You really need to break it down in time and stage. So I did a project with Adidas, for example, years ago, and I was in Germany, and their ATS allowed them to break out time to fill and stage, and you could actually see how long it took from the time a rec was opened to the time when the first candidate was interviewed or screened, how long screening to interviews, how long interviews to, that kind of thing, right? And you could actually compare, like, here's how long it's taking for you on average, hiring manager who fills 10 recs in a year. Here's the company average, and you are well above the company average. Like, it was kind of a bar chart, time and stage. And I really like the visual around that. So first step is, I'll give you an example, but the first step is you should diagnose your own kind of funnel and see how long things are taking in a stage, because you might be surprised. The area where I see the biggest opportunities, they're both related to interviewing. One is just scheduling can be a nightmare. to get the key people. So too many people are involved. They're in too many time zones. They're too busy. You don't have access to their calendars. We waste so much time scheduling, unscheduling, rescheduling. That's just kind of a no-brainer, kind of low-hanging fruit. Pre-book interview days with hiring managers. And then similarly, making same-day decisions is what companies that are beating you beating you out for talent are doing. They're having same-day wrap-up debrief meetings, and they're making decisions. They're comparing candidates to the requirements, not waiting to get 7 candidates interviewed and then have one mega meeting and compare all 7 3 weeks after the first candidate was interviewed. They're making same-day decisions. And I think there's really a lot of excuses and kind of victim-y kind of language that recruiters will use around why that's hard to do. And the reality is, your competitors, which probably include companies we work with, are doing it. Even what we consider older companies are doing it and moving in that direction. And so that to me is just an unbelievably low-hanging fruit opportunity, is to make same-day decisions.
We're 3 down, John, 2 to go. Give me number 4.
Yeah, so number 4 is great candidates demand great hiring managers. And one of the things that I saw with my own eyes is that the hiring managers who get the best talent, they own it. They don't see recruiting as something outside of their day job. They are absolutely involved in courting candidates early in the process and staying close to the candidate throughout the process. And when I first started kind of trying to elevate myself from more of a transactional recruiter, customer servicey recruiter, to that of more of an advisor, and eventually got promoted to lead, manager, director, head of, in my career, I realized that I needed to reframe some of my requests of hiring managers. I think my initial framing was, I want to be your talent advisor. I want to be a strategic partner to you. And therefore, I need you to do these kinds of things so I can partner with you effectively. And then we're going to get speed, quality, diversity, these kinds of outcomes. And that worked pretty well. I'd say that's kind of a B, kind of on an A, B, C, D, F kind of scale. That's pretty good. What I realized worked even better, especially during the last decade where there was so much competition for talent, unemployment was at record lows for most of the time, was that I needed to reframe it that, great candidates need you to be a great hiring manager. Don't be a great hiring manager just because I want you to be, because we're setting some standard for what great looks like for hiring managers. Do it because if you don't, you are not going to get great talent. And so the past couple of years, worked with my team to develop something called the hiring manager maturity model. And I was thinking about the kinds of hiring managers that are getting the best talent actually very much kind of champion this notion of I own it. It's part of my day job. I'm not going to even wait for recruiting. I'm not going to wait for your process. I'm not going to wait for your 11 steps to do X. I'm going to own this because I know that I need to own this if I'm going to get the kind of talent I want to get. And so I've seen lots of examples. I'll tell you a quick funny story of someone who did not own it. When I joined Amazon, I was 28, heading up tech recruiting. It was kind of a new kind of role for me, and the company was just selling books just in the United States, much smaller company. But it was interesting. One of the most respected engineering leaders happened to be a horrific partner to recruiting, and not horrific because he was mean or unreasonable. In fact, he was too reasonable. He was slow and he didn't own it. And I remember when I was doing my rounds, meeting new leaders, all the directors in the business, kind of new in my job, second, third day on the job, I met with this guy. And I was asking him a little bit about his business and what's going on. He said, yeah, John, actually, I do have a specific request for you. I made an offer to an engineer about 2 weeks ago. And you know what? I never heard back. And I'm really curious, if he's going to accept or not. And I remember laughing, going, oh, I can tell you right now, I don't even have to check. Like, he did not accept. Like, there's no scenario where someone just sits on an offer for 2 weeks. But it really highlighted for me, like, just the complete diversity, kind of a bell curve of, I had these like amazing hiring managers that would never say something like that. That is such a passive, I wonder what's going on. No, recruiters don't tell me anything. We made an offer and I never heard back. Did he accept? I mean, that is so passive, you know what I mean? And then I had managers that were so aggressive, they were engaging headhunters directly. They were building their own university recruiting programs on the side. They were driving their interviewing training. They're delivering their own training. They were owning it. But a lot of what I've seen when I look at the hiring managers get the best talent, we do a lot of focus group with candidates. And I ask candidates sometimes, why did you come to this company and not here? You had offers at Google and Facebook and Netflix and Amazon and wherever. Why did you come to this company? And they said, it wasn't because the money was the best. It wasn't even because the job was that different. It really wasn't. I'm a, data scientist or whatever. It's all really interesting. It was the hiring manager. Like the hiring manager was the difference maker. The hiring manager invested in me, not just selling me, but really listening to me. And I felt confident that this person I could learn from, this person I wanted to work for. And so that's something that I realized is this reframing from help me be a better hiring manager, or you need to be a better hiring manager to help me so I can help you, is not the right framing. The right framing, I think, or a better framing, is great candidates are going to demand this. So if you want this kind of talent and you're operating here, you got to step up.
Yeah, it's funny. Myself and yourself were on a call yesterday, and we were just looking at some Glassdoor reviews from different companies. And, so much of it is about the hiring manager. And I don't know that hiring managers, or most hiring managers, understand that the spotlight really is on them. And they kind of blame recruiters for a recruiting process. But like the candidate's saying, you're the person I'm going to go work for. Like, this is my first introduction to you and how you work and how you prioritize. And nobody probably knows in the first interview if you're going to be the future hire, but you got to treat them, I guess, like they're your future best team member, and really make sure you're putting the effort in, returning their calls, being engaged. Glassdoor is littered with examples of hiring managers who are completely disengaged, right? And, maybe you're not going to hire that person, but they know so many of the people in their sector. They're part of your community. They're not part of the recruiting community. They'll forget about the recruiters. Chances are you're going to, if you're a salesperson or a sales lead or a sales head or you're a technical head, you're going to probably come across them, or you're going to be in the same communities. And this is your reputation on the line. You're so right that, there is that high expectation. And, I don't think that enough people realize that. I'm not putting blame on the hiring managers. I think it's the job of the recruiters to show them that, to bring them into this world if they're not already there, because they're busy, they're doing stuff, they're leading teams. I'm going to quickly jump back to something you mentioned, John. You talked about a hiring manager maturity model. Can we access that? Folks listening, can they access that? Can they find out more about that if they want to dig into that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think we even have a graphic prepared. I don't know if Neil's able to throw that up. Yeah. So there's the URL, recruitingtoolbox.com/HMMM. One of the things that I mentioned is put together kind of a maturity model, something that says, how do you move from this kind of passive aggressive, I wonder if that candidate accepted my offer. And if I'm not hitting my hiring goals, it's because my recruiter sucks. If you can move from that end of the spectrum to this kind of talent champion who's really driving and leading and owning, this is a really interesting tool designed for recruiters and recruiting leaders who really care about up-leveling the capabilities of their hiring manager. And so it's got some very tactical, practical, how-to kind of recommendations to help you make your hiring managers better hiring managers. And I actually think that's a big part of recruiting success from this past decade, is not just filling roles with great talent, but also how do we leave a legacy behind after we've worked in a role or worked with a client where we've actually made our hiring managers better at their jobs. And so this is really designed to help you have an honest conversation. Where are our hiring managers today, and how do we move them up and to the right to get them kind of more effective at their jobs?
So I know we got to wrap the audience listening, the live audience who are going to rush towards the inauguration ceremony, which kicks off in just under 30 minutes, John. But that brings us to probably 5 of 5. From all these smartest hiring managers you've dealt with over the years, what's the last piece of advice you want to share with us from those smartest hiring managers?
Yeah, what's interesting is the best hiring managers actually want us to be a talent advisor. They want a strategic partner. They pull us in. And I said a little bit earlier, I think it's a mistake if it feels like you're having to constantly push on a hiring manager, like, let me hold still while I talent advise you. It's kind of I have a little sticker that says that, which is kind of the orientation, like, oh, this manager's all over hold still, I want to talent, no, come here, I want it here, come here, come talk to me. Now hold still, I want to talent, you're probably not in the right kind of, the relationship is probably not great if you're literally having to chase. The very best hiring managers, I was diagnosing and kind of trying to figure out, looking back, like when I got invited in, or when recruiters on my team got invited into quarterly business review meetings, when managers started saying, department heads start saying, I really want to make sure my recruiter or my recruiting managers in this meeting, we're going to talk about strategic planning. When I started to look at, like, what is different about those hiring managers, what kind of results are they getting versus the ones that not only don't invite us into those meetings, but those meetings don't even talk about talent. And I realized the ones that are getting the best talent, they're actually pulling us in as advisors. They're asking us tough questions. These are the managers that expect more from us. And I would love to say I've had, 100 amazing recruiting manager bosses in my career, and I haven't. Not to discount some of the great stuff I've learned from my managers over the years, but the people that have pushed me, the people that have been kind of the ones that have stretched me into new areas that have made me better at my craft have really been unrealistic, unreasonable hiring managers, but they do it with love. It's because they want to get great talent, not because they're micromanagers, not because they're asses. It's because they expect more. I have this little sticker I'll share with you. It's kind of funny. I don't know if you can see that there. But
you might call it out for our podcast listeners, John. I love this.
It says, I eat unrealistic hiring manager requirements for breakfast. And one of my favorite recruiters who happens to work at Amazon now, she worked at Microsoft and Google, Amy Miller, she got one of the t-shirts with this on it and posted it a few days ago, which made me very happy. But that's something that I kind of joke about is, that kind of bring it. Like, I actually want unrealistic hiring managers, not unrealistic, like hard to work with, but unreasonable because they want the very best talent and we don't pay the best. Unreasonable because they want to cut 20 days out of a 50-day process when the average in the company is already 60 days. And they want to actually, it's that kind of stuff, those kinds of managers that put these constraints on you that really drive innovation, that really force you to come up with things that are, I hate to use this term, out of the box and really different than how you've done it before. And so I think the best hiring managers, they're pushing on us. They are actually making us talent advisors. They are demanding that. And so when we have focus groups and we talk to, at least 1,000 hiring managers a year through focus groups and training work, that's one of the things that's really been interesting. I would say 5-6 years ago, there wasn't nearly as much pull. It's like, I want a recruiter who will manage the process, send me good candidates, and then get out of my way. Now it's like, I want insights. Like, should we open our sales office in the United States in Chicago or Atlanta, and why? I want someone that's coming in and telling me, like, what are the top 3 sources for candidates from underrepresented groups? I'm not seeing nearly enough Hispanic or African American candidates. What is it that we should be doing differently, and how can I do that? I want feedback on my team's performance as an interviewing team. Are we doing a good job? How do we know? Like, they're asking these questions. They're expecting a lot more out of us, and that to me is thrilling. One of the best things you can do for your career is work with unrealistic, unreasonable hiring managers. Not, again, the asses, although the asses will give you some great stories to tell, because that's important too. But it's the ones, it's the situations where you can kind of run to the fire. It's those people that kind of see there's a hiring manager in pain. There's a lot of stuff going on. They're expecting all this. And if you run towards those people, you will leapfrog your peers in your career, because you will get this density of experience that you just won't get from kind of reasonable people filling recs over and over and over again. So that's number 5 out of 5.
I think if there's any upside for recruiters in all the technology, innovation, new processes that have come in over the last few years, is to give us the time to be this type of talent advisor. And, it has only hit me over the last few years because I wasn't good enough on these areas back in my day when I was a recruiter. I'll be honest now, looking back. But to me, like, there's 2 big buckets you got to be great at. One is, and we've got some people on the chat already mentioned this, market intelligence, or what you might call the candidate kind of marketplace, understanding the candidates that are out there deeply, the competitors who are looking for that. So that intelligence on the kind of the roles you're hiring for, the people who represent the skills you're looking for, the competitors who are out there hiring, you got to bring that to the table. But the other part is process around hiring. You are a hiring expert. So again, it's your job to figure out what's the best way to get a really good outcome. How do I, from this, all my knowledge on talent and all the perhaps people we can attract to a shortlist or source, how do I convert it into a really good outcome? An excellent hire that's going to be successful in that team. Your job is to also know that, make recommendations on assessment methodologies, on the structure, to kind of go to a hiring manager goes, there's 4 interviews I want to do. It's like, no, you're going to do 2. They're going to look like this. Or I'm a 1 interview person. No, we're going to have 3. And let me tell you why it's going to be 3 parts of our process.
Right.
I think, I don't think you can survive as a recruiter unless you're that kind of a talented advisor. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, it's been amazing because, to your point, we have things available now in 2021, even the last 5 years, that you and I didn't have available to us, 10 years ago for sure, or longer. And so I think, shame on us if we're not leveraging some of the great insights. And I'll tell you, the recruiter before you may have had, more strategic conversations than you had with this hiring manager. And it may be, at your same company or at the company they worked at before. And so one of the things I'm also seeing is smaller companies, kind of tier 2 companies that don't get in the news a lot, are hiring a lot more sophisticated hiring managers. They're coming to these smaller firms out of these big tech companies or out of these, big retailers or, big whatever industry leaders. And they're coming to these smaller companies and they're bringing those high expectations with them. They're like, well, my last company, the recruiter did a market analysis and we didn't just look at compensations, comp reports. We actually did our own market analysis. When should I expect to get that from you? And you're like, what? I don't, I've never done that before. But so what's happening, which is beautiful to me, is that we're moving these people around. A lot of them have these really high expectations. And even in smaller companies, you're seeing expectations around, I want a recommendation on my interview process. They're actually pulling for that kind of stuff because they've had it in the past. And I love that about our industry, this kind of people moving around, bigger, smaller companies, big scale, small scale. We're in this kind of amazing, we're all kind of racing up this learning curve together. And it's a fantastic time to be in recruiting, in my opinion.
I spoke to a great TA leader in one of those kind of smaller to medium sizes, but high growth companies last week. And she was saying how the business came to her last year and said, hey, we're thinking of doing this bit of this project and hiring these people in this location, which was a bad idea. And they sent a 20-page report with analysis going, don't do it. And they came back to her last week and said, hey, we're thinking about doing that project again. She said, I sent them back an 80-page report this time. I'm like, you got the message. It lasted a year. You're back asking the same question. Trust me, the data hasn't changed. Here's even more. Right. I love that that's the type of thing we do these days. We got a great comment here from Ian Martin saying, gotta love those unicorn hunting hiring managers. Yeah. I'm thinking of a new sticker, John. Maybe it's unicorn hunting hiring machine. Right. Something like that might be on the list for you. But yeah, I second that. I'm going to recap, John, because I'm conscious that I'm sure you want to go watch the inauguration as well and get to this big momentous time in history today. But 5 points, just to recap. Can you bring us back through just quickly what those 5 points are, and we can recap on them?
Yeah, sure. So the first one is strategy starts before the kickoff. It's one of those things that is not, real strategy doesn't happen in 30 minutes when during the urgency of I got to get this rec filled. The second one is that, the best hiring managers really do focus on quality over quantity. And they don't want to just see more and more resumes. They actually want to spend less time on fewer candidates or more time on fewer candidates. The third one is that speed is the love language of hiring managers. If you want to, influence a hiring manager, if you want to be a hero to hiring managers, talk about how you can speed things up, not be the person that's always slowing things down. And then the great candidates demand hiring managers is part of the reframing that I think we can do to kind of help hiring managers see if you want to get that kind of talent, you need to step up differently. They're interviewing us as much as we're interviewing them. And a big part of their decision making will be whether or not they consider you a great hiring manager and how close you've been to this process. And then the last one is there's a tremendous amount of pull. Hiring managers actually want us to be more of a strategic partner, to play that talent advisor role. Their expectations of us are going up just as our expectations of them are going up, which I think makes for just phenomenal opportunities for learning and growth and impact and all the things that we care about. So those are the top 5.
You've dropped so much advice and tips in the last 45 minutes. It probably seems rude of me to ask if you have any one last piece of advice to leave us with to add to our shortlist, like we ask every guest and we asked you the last time you were on.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would mention, this is in the hiring manager maturity model as well, is we do need to expect more from our hiring managers, and we need to articulate that. And whatever you can do in your company to influence adding in something about, is this manager an effective hiring manager, to performance reviews, anything you can do to switch up all the surveys that we send out as corporate TA teams. How's my driving hiring manager? Am I making you happy? We need to switch that up, and we need to be sending surveys to recruiters asking how hiring managers are doing when a rec is closed. We need to find opportunities to kind of raise the expectation of hiring managers and hold them accountable through performance reviews, through survey feedback. We really need to elevate the expectations, and I think that's going to have a huge impact, not just on us, not just to make my job more fun, because I love working with hiring managers. It's favorite part of my job, probably even more than working with candidates. We need to not just do that, but we also need to make sure that we are creating these better hiring managers and giving them feedback and holding them accountable. And I think that's missing for a lot of TA teams right now. So that'd be my parting advice.
It's great. And it's not just pointing at the negatives, it's highlighting the brilliant ones, to your point.
Yes.
It gives an opportunity to shine a light and say, this hiring manager, she's awesome. And here's why everyone should be more like that. John, thank you so much for joining us. It's a big day, big advice. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. We'll hopefully have you back later in the year, but I'll leave you to go witness a momentous time in history, the inauguration of a new president of the United States in 15 minutes for those of you listening live. John, thanks for joining us. We'll have you back again.
Thanks, Johnny. Thanks, everyone.
And for the rest of you joining us live, thank you for listening. Thanks for your questions and comments. We're going to be back again next week. We've got a great show planned for you next week. You can find out more by going to socialtalent.com/the shortlist. But joining us next week, we're going to have Bob Rosen. Bob Rosen is chairman and CEO of Healthy Companies International. He's a world-renowned speaker and expert on leadership. And Bob's going to be having a conversation with me about conscious and healthy leadership tactics for 2021. So appropriate with a new leader in the United States in hopefully 14 minutes time when President-elect Biden is inaugurated. If you're listening to the podcast, hopefully he's already been inaugurated and put in as the new president, the 46th president of the United States, and hopefully will promise us great leadership over the next 4 years. If leadership is important to you, which it should be in 2021, join us next week at the same time. That's 4 p.m. UK Irish time. That's, of course, 11 a.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 8 a.m. on the West Coast. And go Google where it is in your clock, or check out our recordings, our podcast on Apple or Spotify or wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks for joining us. Now go watch the inauguration if you're watching live, or rewatch it if you haven't. Hopefully we have a new president for those of you rewatching or re-listening to the podcast in the United States, and a better 4 years to come. Thanks for joining me.